I apologize for the delay. I difficulties. I had to restart my internet and then it started working. Because we're already late. Open up my mouth wide so that you can fill it with the words you would have me to speak. In the name of Jesus, amen. Okay, so let's hop right into it. So during our last meeting, we talked about that TD Jakes filed against Dwayne Youngblood. Dwayne Youngblood is the gentleman who is accusing Bishop TD Jakes of sexually grooming him, sexually approaching him inappropriately. So I wanted to start off by going through like a brief rundown of where the case is right now. So let me pull that up. So again, I probably should have did this the first time, but I am still getting acclimated to what format I want to have. But this case is being tried in the Western District of Pennsylvania, which is in Pittsburgh, and that is where Dwayne Youngblood lives. My intention for this channel is that it's educational and also I don't want to say entertainment. I don't really want to be I mean, I hope you enjoy watching it, but I really do want it to be educational. I want it to be informative. So we're going to take things slowly, and I really want to explain the different steps of filing a lawsuit, why we do it, the importance, and the implications of it. So this is being filed in the Western District of Pennsylvania because that's where Dwayne Youngblood lives. And again, this lawsuit is TD Jakes suing Dwayne Youngblood preemptively, meaning TD Jakes probably knows that Youngblood wants to file a lawsuit in the future, and so he files one first. So in our last meeting, we kind of talked about strategy behind that. I think it's a way to put pressure on Youngblood. Basically, TD Jakes is saying if you have something to say, just lay it out right here, because now Youngblood has to file a counterclaim. If he's going to bring a claim, he has to file a counterclaim right now because it's a part of the same nexus. So the law favors um, effic- efficiently using judicial resources. And one of the ways we do that is if we have a counterclaim, we have to bring it up right then and there in the same lawsuit. So Youngblood can't just respond to TD Jakes and then 10 years later be like, oh, and by the way, I have this sexual assault case that I didn't bring up 10 years ago. He has to bring it up right now because it's all a part of the same nexus of facts. And so, in my opinion, TD Jakes' attorney brought this defamation suit as an offensive strategy to force the defendant to come out with the details. TD Jakes wanted these details to come out on his timeline and not on the defendant's timeline. So it really put TD Jakes in the position of strength. Now we can talk about why he wanted them to come out right now. What's the timeline? We know that TD Jakes stepped down as being bishop. I think that might have been a week or two ago. He recently um, made that news. Well, I think he actually said it maybe a year or two ago at the final Woman Thou Art Loose conference. He said that Sarah was going to take over. And so what he did 2 weeks ago, maybe this is her formally taking over. Maybe she's going to be preaching now. I don't follow his ministry closely to be able to answer that. But I can't help but think that there was some strategy there. You know, a man like TD Jakes, with the type of counsel he's probably receiving from financial people, attorneys, presumably other men of God, I'm sure they're talking about strategy and timing. So I don't believe that it was a coincidence that he filed this suit and then months later he's formally handing over his church. So anyway, so he files this suit in Pennsylvania because that's where Youngblood lives. In our legal system, you have to bring a claim where the defendant lives. So that's why it's in Pennsylvania. So moving right along, the complaint was filed. Let's see, it was filed in November of 2024. Let's see, November 25th of 2024. And as you recall, the interview that Youngblood did with Larry Reed Live was in October of 2024. So TD Jakes really didn't waste any time. So that was filed, and then there was a lot of different things filed in between, different attorneys appearing, different preliminary motions. But we're going to get to Youngblood's response, which is what we started getting into last time, and we kind of cut ourselves short. So first, I want to start with the special motion to dismiss that Youngblood filed. So when someone files a complaint against someone, you have, as a responding attorney, you can either file an answer, which means you actually respond to the allegations, or you can file a motion to dismiss, which is saying, based on the face of this complaint, this person doesn't have a case, so this case has to be dismissed. And so in lieu of filing an answer, Youngblood's attorney filed a motion to dismiss. He actually filed two, which we will get into. So the first one he filed is a special motion to dismiss, and let me pull that up. Okay. The first one he filed is a special motion to dismiss. A special motion to dismiss is a quicker way to get rid of a complaint. If there is a specific law on point that will get rid of the complaint quick, like if it goes to the heart of the complaint, then you can get rid of the complaint. I hate to keep saying that over and over, but you can get rid of the complaint quicker with a special motion to dismiss versus your ordinary motion to dismiss. So Youngblood first filed a special motion to dismiss based on the Pennsylvania anti-SLAPP statute. As we discussed before, the anti-SLAPP statute protects people who are speaking out on matters that involve public concern. So think about like your Aaron Brockovich and other type of whistleblowers. These are typically underdogs who don't have access to the legal resources that whoever they're whistleblowing on, those people actually do have access. They have power, they have money. And so the anti-SLAPP protects those underdogs who are actually going up against those powerful machines and attempting to tell the truth about a situation. It protects those people specifically from being sued for defamation. So that is what Youngblood tried to do at first. He did file this special motion to dismiss pursuant to Pennsylvania's anti-SLAPP statute. And as we did with the complaint, we're going to go page by page so that we can really see what the attorney is saying. So I love a good table of contents. This attorney is very organized. I really appreciate his presentation. You can tell that he put a lot of time into this. This is not something that he haphazardly put together. So I really appreciate that. So we're going to see an introduction. We're going to get into the background. We're going to go over the legal standard. Then we're going to get into his arguments. And lastly, the conclusion. And you see right here, request for leave to file a cross complaint. So that's what we were alluding to earlier. Table of authorities. These are the cases that the attorney is relying on to prove his case. Okay. This court is taxed with I'm sorry, I'm gonna start over, y'all. This court is tasked with addressing one of the most egregious attempts to pervert the judicial process for personal gain. That's a strong intro. Plaintiff Thomas Dexter T.D. Jakes, a self proclaimed spiritual leader revered by millions. So, this is interesting. He's calling him a self proclaimed spiritual leader. So, he's not even acknowledging that this man is an established spiritual leader. He's saying, he calls himself this. So, this is kind of getting into the nice, nasty language that kind of goes back and forth between attorneys sometimes. It can be entertaining at times. But anyway, he's saying that TD Jakes has weaponized this lawsuit not to seek justice, but to muzzle the voice of truth. His hypocrisy is staggering, standing in the pulpit on Sundays to preach virtue while allegedly engaging in depraved acts betraying the principles he claims to uphold. As scripture warns, beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. So my man done came out the gate saying he's a self-proclaimed spiritual leader. He done called him a false prophet, and he's quoted scripture. He didn't come to play today. Okay. And then he juxtaposes that with Dwayne Youngblood, who is a survivor of alleged clergy abuse and an advocate for transparency. Um, and he goes on to talk about Youngblood. But he admits that Youngblood is not a saint. He admits that. And I think it's great to admit that up front. If your client does have certain character flaws or something in his or her background that um, the court will frown upon, it's best to go ahead and put those things up front, get it out the way, let the court know, yes, this exists, but that's not the focus. If you try to hide it, it becomes a bigger deal. So I think it was very smart to put this up front and say, hey, we're acknowledging that he's not a saint, but he's still a victim. And how many of us have that duality, right? None of us are saints, but there were certainly some situations where we were victims, and our non sainthood does not take away from the fact that we were victims at those times. One thing I didn't like about the complaint that Bishop Jakes' attorney presented was that he really focused on character flaws and the past of Youngblood, how Youngblood had been charged with sexual offenses against minors numerous times and things like that. And we can all agree that that's disgusting. But what his attorney didn't address is what actually happened between Jakes and Youngblood. So I found that to be so telling. How do you defame somebody for telling a story and you never address the facts of the story? That's just kind of crazy. So, factual background, the Potter's House, we know what the Potter's House is. Um, then he gets into what evidence he has to support his motion to dismiss. So we started to talk about this last time. He has several affidavits, several witnesses who are saying, yes, Dwayne Youngblood told me that this happened at the time that it happened. So let's kind of go through those things now. Multiple sworn affidavits corroborate defendant's account, meaning Youngblood. Witnesses such as Jeffrey S. Gray and Richard Edwin Youngblood have provided detailed testimonies recounting defendant's disclosures about plaintiff. Jeffrey S. Gray attested to a specific incident in which plaintiff allegedly made unwelcome advances toward defendant following a church service in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. See Blackburn Declaration Exhibit A. Richard Edwin Youngblood, which is Youngblood's brother, confirmed that defendant consistently described plaintiff's attempts to groom him, including an alleged financial proposal contingent upon sexual favors. In addition to Jeffrey S. Gray and Richard Edwin Youngblood, the defendant has affidavits from Daniel B. Spaulding, LaShawn Youngblood, Joshua Munoz, and Landon Claiborne. Public scrutiny of plaintiff's behavior has intensified in recent years. fueled by viral social media content and investigative reporting. Numerous reports have linked plaintiff to inappropriate relationships with young men and participation in sexually charged gatherings hosted by Sean Diddy Combs. Sean Combs is currently under federal indictment for RICO, sex trafficking, prostitution, etc. One of Mr. Combs' male sex workers has come forward and named Bishop Jakes as a participant in Diddy's freak-off parties. Allegations include plaintiff's alleged grooming of male mentees and his role in covering up misconduct within his religious organization. See Blackburn Declaration, which is Exhibit G. Defendant has alleged that plaintiff and his associates have engaged in retaliatory conduct to silence him. Not only has plaintiff filed this baseless lawsuit, but defendant has also reported receiving threats from individuals associated with plaintiff, including his son. So we'll get to that. So one of the pieces of evidence that the attorney attached to this motion to dismiss is a police report that Youngblood filed saying that he was targeted online by Jermaine Jakes, that Jermaine Jakes threatened him via social media. Despite the mounting evidence and public discourse, plaintiff continues to portray himself as a moral and spiritual leader, using his platform to denounce those who seek accountability. His public sermons dismissing the allegation as lies starkly contrasts with biblical principles. And he goes into more scriptures there. So let's get into the legal standard. What is the legal standard for this motion to be granted? Under Pennsylvania's newly enacted anti-SLAPP statute, a special motion to dismiss may be filed against lawsuits targeting protected public expression. The statute is modeled on similar laws in other jurisdictions and explicitly aims to curb litigation intended to silence speech on matters of public concern. So this gets to the crux of Youngblood's argument. He's saying that these allegations that I am presenting against TD Jakes is of major importance to the public. So there's no way that it can be defamation. Okay. Key provisions of the anti-SLAPP statute. 1. Protected public expression. The statute defines protected public expression as communication related to matters of public concern, including speech made in a legislative, executive, judicial, or administrative proceeding. 2. Communications under review in such proceedings. 3. Speech on issues of public importance. So this is the prong that this attorney is proceeding under. So we'll keep going. He gets into some law about the anti-SLAPP statute. Okay, so the first point that Youngblood is making is that Bishop Jakes is a public figure. So by the mere fact that he is a public figure, if Youngblood is making allegations about him being sexually inappropriate, this is a matter that will be of great importance to the public. And I actually think that that is a great point. So we talked about in our first live how it's very easy for public figures to be defamed because they do have, if you say something about a public figure, if you say it on the right platform, their brand can be impacted so easily and so quickly. Look at Shannon Sharpe, right? So this young lady has made allegations. He's lost his job with ESPN, worth millions of dollars. He has not been found guilty. The judge has not ruled in the girl's favor or anything. Just the mere allegation, he has lost this contract worth millions of dollars. So, as you can see, if someone says something against a public figure, it's like a snowball rolling downhill. It gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. That being said, when you are a public figure, then things that you do also can be a matter of public importance. So it's a double-edged sword. Yes, it's easier to defame you, but it's also likely that things concerning you are matters of public importance. So that's just a double-edged sword of being a public figure. So he kind of gets into, how TD Jakes is a public figure. We're not going to go through all those things. We know that. TD Jakes is defamation proof. That's a very provocative statement. Public discourse about plaintiffs' alleged misconduct is widespread and well documented. Social media platforms and investigative reports have brought to light allegations of grooming, sexual abuse, and exploitation involving plaintiffs with specific claims alleging 1. Plaintiff's participation in sex parties hosted by Sean Combs as reported by multiple sources. 2. Text message allegedly sent by a plaintiff to a male mentee containing flirtatious and inappropriate content. And the Youngblood does include this text message thread as one of the pieces of evidence attached to this motion to dismiss. We're not going to show it, but I'm sure you guys have probably seen it. It's a text message thread that appears to be TD Jakes flirting with another man. And then 3, allegation by plaintiff's former mentee Manasseh Jordan, who claimed that plaintiff groomed and sexually assaulted him during his youth. And I've also seen videos of Manasseh Jordan where he's making these type of allegations. If you also look at Manasseh Jordan, I don't really want to get into his looks, but it appears that he I think his appearance, he's a man that it would not be somebody that you would say is super masculine. I'm trying to really choose my words and be appropriate and also be empathetic. So when you think about somebody who is being called a predator and somebody who grooms, a lot of times they will go after a certain type of male. And so when you later on see those males, have their eyebrows done or wear their hair a certain way, I think that it can give more credence to that person's argument or give more credence to that person's allegations. And that's how I feel about Manasseh. Now, he could totally be lying, but just knowing that abusers, that they do have a type, when they groom, that they do have a type, um, and knowing the impact on young men when they are groomed in that way. For instance, Donnie McClurkin, he talked about how he was sexually assaulted in church, and I believe he said he was raped. And to see things that he struggled with, including his sexuality, we just know that that is a lot of times a natural progression. So, again, these are allegations, so we're saying alleged, but when I saw Manasseh Jordan sharing his testimony, I found him to be credible, is basically what I'm trying to say. Okay, so this is more scripture. Then he gets into talking about Eddie Long, who was a close friend of plaintiff. He was accused of coercing young men into sexual relationships under the guise of spiritual mentorship. So this is not the strongest legal argument. This is basically saying birds of a feather flock together, right? So just because Eddie Long was doing it, just because Eddie Long allegedly was doing it, just because Sean Combs allegedly was doing it, it does not mean that plaintiff was doing it. Doesn't mean TD Jakes was doing it, but a it does paint a bad picture. But legally, we can't take someone else's allegations and put them on a third person. So, not the strongest legal argument, but I will say that he is painting a picture that does not look good. Defendant's public statements concerning his childhood sexual assaults committed by members of the clergy contribute to a broader conversation. I thought this also was a provocative argument. So, what Youngblood is saying is, hey, I'm not just talking about TD Jakes. TD Jakes is making the focus of my conversation. He's making himself the focus. What I'm really talking about is sexual assault that happens in the church. And that's what I'm really talking about. I'm not even just talking about TD Jakes. So I thought that that was smart. I think that this is a smart argument to include. Okay, so actually getting into the argument, defendant statements are protected public expression. One, because plaintiff is a public figure, and then the implications of being a public figure. So we talked about that. We talked about those things already. Okay. Um, Now the attorney is getting into Pennsylvania public policy and how Pennsylvania has a policy that seeks to expose sexual abuse within clergy. And so the attorney is basically saying that Youngblood's exposition contributes to Pennsylvania's public policy. I think that that's an okay argument. You can find public policy to support anything. So, not the strongest, but I think it's very innovative. I think this is an innovative attorney. I think he's creative and he's trying to throw everything at the wall. So, in terms of legal strategy, I think I think he's wise, but I don't think that that's the strongest argument. Okay, anti-slap protections. We talked about that. Burden shifting to plaintiff. Once the defendant demonstrates that the claims arise from protected public expression, the burden shifts to plaintiff to establish a prima facie case for each element of their claims. Plaintiff must present admissible evidence to prove that the defendant's statements were false and made with actual malice. However, plaintiff has failed to provide credible evidence to meet this burden, relying instead on speculative assertions. The statute provides immunity if the plaintiff cannot establish a prima facie case or if the court determines that there is no genuine issue of material fact, entitling the defendant to judgment as a matter of law. Plaintiff cannot establish a prima facie case. Under Pennsylvania law, to prevail in a defamation action, plaintiff has the burden of proving 1. The defamatory character of the communication, 2. Its publication by a defendant, 3. Its application to the plaintiff, 4. An understanding by the reader or listener of its defamatory meaning, 5. An understanding by the reader or listener of an intent by the defendant that the statement refers to the plaintiff. And 6. Special harm resulting to the plaintiff from its publication. Oh, and 7. Abuse of a conditionally privileged occasion. So, this is a lot. These are the 7 factors that someone has to prove in order to prevail in a defamation action. As we discussed in the prior live, most people, even in Georgia does not have all these requirements. But even in Georgia, a normal person, I don't want to say normal because all of us are special and gifted by God. Because we're not famous does not mean that we're not. But what I mean is it's hard for a non super famous person to prove defamation a lot of times because we're just not going to have those damages. You know, if somebody goes online and he writes a bad Google review, for me, maybe 500 people will see it in a year, maybe, you know, compared to 1 million people watching this video of TD Jakes in an hour. You know what I mean? Those two things are just not comparable. It's just not comparable. So it's a lot easier for a celebrity to prove defamation. However, this attorney is saying that truth is a complete defense to defamation. So if I can prove that that thing is true, that's a complete defense. So if Youngblood can prove that he was sexually groomed by TD Jakes, that's a complete defense. And I believe that TD Jakes is banking on him not being able to prove this. So that's if TD Jakes knows that he is innocent, then it's like, why not? Kind of like the case with not TD Jakes, the case with Sean, what's his name? Jay-Z. I can't even think of his name. The case with Jay-Z and the young lady who recently accused him of rape, him and Sean Combs. Jay-Z, he was standing on business like, no, this is absolutely a lie from the time it came out. And he filed a defamation claim against her. He knew, at least by his words, that he didn't do that. So he stood on business the entire time, and he filed that defamation claim, and there was just no wavering in his stance. So if you know you didn't do it, then yeah, be offensive and file a defamation claim. Why not? Let's just get all the cards out on the table. But if there is a chance, if you secretly know that you are guilty, if there could be any shred of evidence, I would say it's not a wise strategy. In this case, I don't know. I will say the most damaging thing I've seen so far is the text message thread between TD Jakes and the young man where it appears that he's flirting. Now, flirting and grooming, though, are two different things. I think that young man may have been early 20s. He wasn't a child, is what I'm trying to say. The young man that he was texting was not a child. So legally, TD Jakes can have preferences for young men. I mean, legally, he can. And so, because if he has a preference for a young man, legally, that does not mean that he's grooming, is what I'm trying to say. So, I think the text message is strong evidence, but then at the same time, perhaps that's just evidence that he favors young men, which morally we would think that that would be against what he preaches. But I've seen interviews that he's done recently where he seems to say that he's not sure about whether being gay is against God's law. However, either way, whether it's against what he preaches or not, it's not against the law. Grooming, grooming is like right there on the line. It depends on at what age you're grooming someone. If you're grooming a child, yeah, of course, you're being inappropriate with a child. Of course, you could be using a position of power to, sexually coerce a child, of course. But if you're getting into a situation where the person is 18, the person is 19, the person is 20, and you're 40, you're 50, yeah, it's gross because of the age difference, but we're getting into a category where we're talking about a preference and not necessarily breaking the law. So I think this is a slippery slope here. I really think that this is a slippery slope, and I'm curious to see what the counterclaim is that Youngblood will file. It may be some type of emotional distress claim because he's not claiming that TD Jakes touched him. So we're not talking about sexual assault. He's not saying that he raped him or that he, physically. He said he blocked his exit. So I'm curious to see what claim Youngblood is going to proceed under. What is his claim? Because grooming is not illegal, depending on the age. It might be gross, it might be immoral, but it's not illegal. So we will see. Now he may try to assert sexual assault just based on, sexual assault. It doesn't have to be necessarily touching. It can be just unwanted attention that makes a person fearful or feel uncomfortable. So, maybe that is maybe that's the angle that he takes, but we'll see. But definitely emotional distress. Especially because the Youngblood has gone on to say, because of my experience of being abused in the church, I then have gone on to be an abuser. So if you think, I'm always, as an attorney, I'm thinking about damages. Like, for instance, we had somebody contact us um, a few days ago, and it sounds like there's an issue going on between a brother and a sister. And I'm like, yeah, that's really messed up. But what are your damages? You know what I mean? How were you hurt by this? A lot of times people are offended, but the math is not mathing on paper. So in terms of mathing, he has millions of dollars worth of damages for emotional distress if he is saying that because of his experience with TD Jakes, he went on to be a rapist. That means he's gone to jail, time he served in jail, how his reputation was harmed. Just so many ways. So many damages flow from that. So I know it's going to be an emotional distress claim. We'll see if he's going to also say sexual assault. We'll see. Okay. So we're not going to read through all of these things, but basically the attorney is saying that TD Jakes cannot establish a prima facie case of discrimination, meaning on the face of the complaint, he cannot establish these 7 things. So, no evidence of reputational harm. That's not true. He has all kind of reputational harm. Actual malice. I think TD Jakes can show actual malice very easily to accuse someone of sexual assault, especially somebody who's known internationally for being a spiritual leader. And he's a man and he's married and he has kids. You know when you make an accusation like that, or an inference. He didn't say the word sexual assault, but when you make an inference of that, you know that that's going to be terrible. That's going to impact that person in a terrible way. So I think TD Jakes can easily prove actual malice. I think he can easily prove reputational harm. Then the attorney is saying civil conspiracy, that fails. I don't necessarily agree with that either. A conspiracy only requires 2 parties. So as we said in the prior live, that could be TD Jakes and Larry Reid live. They came together and said, hey, Larry Reid obviously has an incentive in producing content that's going to go viral. Youngblood has an incentive. He had already sent or was planning to send a demand letter to TD Jakes for money. So they both have an incentive to make money. So I think the conspiracy saying that it fails, no, not on its face. Now, after discovery, You know, discovery is when both sides actually look at the evidence. Maybe after discovery, we could say the claim fails, but on its face, just looking at the complaint, I would say no, it doesn't fail. Okay, failure to demonstrate legal harm. I disagree. Um, I disagree with that. So, I think the attorney made some good points, but I'm gonna just go ahead and give this spoiler alert. The judge denied this motion to dismiss, this special motion to dismiss. I'm not surprised by that. One, because it's so easy to defame a public figure. If the judge would have granted a special motion to dismiss that quickly, that just would have been just kind of unheard of. And we really have to parse through that. We have to parse through the allegations, and really see if there was defamation there. If you're saying that truth is an absolute defense, then show the truth. Show it. Show the truth that you have. That's an absolute. That's an absolute defense. Show it. Let's get to it. So I'm not surprised that a judge did not grant this. I would not have granted this either. Um, it's just too high stakes to just dismiss it that quickly. It's too high stakes. So, request for leave to file a cross complaint. Like I said, once TD Jakes filed this, then he has to file any cross complaints that he has. Defendant Dwayne Youngblood respectfully requests leave from this court to file a cross complaint against plaintiff TD Jakes and his son Jermaine Jakes for the social media threat sent by Jermaine Jakes on November 3rd, 2024. The threat, which stated, "You might be in dangerous territory, Dwayne. Just be careful," was sent from Texas and received by the defendant in Pennsylvania. So I just can't believe that. I mean, I can't believe it because Twitter fingers, right? But it's just so, it's just low hanging fruit. Like, if somebody is already accusing your family of something, don't make it worse by sending them a threat. Like, that's one of the worst things you can do. And then on social media that's easily traceable to, the person. That just wasn't smart, if that's what he did. Okay, so these are the causes of action in Texas. Intentional infliction of emotional distress. We talked about that. The threatening text message sent by Jermaine Jakes was extreme and outrageous. I disagree. This claim is not going to go anywhere. The threat exasperated defendant's PTSD. No. Extreme and outrageous, that threshold for emotional distress is very high. Just sending a text message like that's not going to meet the threshold. Harassment by communication, that's the other claim. Texas Penal Code section or statute 42 prohibits electronic communications intended to harass, annoy, alarm, or harass another person. Okay, maybe, but that's a criminal. That sounds like that's a criminal claim. So that will be up to a prosecutor to pursue. Oh, but it says, while this is primarily a criminal statute, it can provide the basis for related civil claims where emotional harm is no. That's going to fail. Okay. Causes of action in Pennsylvania where the message was received. Intentional infliction of emotional distress. So we talked about that. That's not, even in Pennsylvania, that's not going to prevail. It impacted his mental health. No. Not from just one simple message. Okay, harassment by communication. Again, that's criminal. Prosecutor will have to bring that up. Civil conspiracy. Okay. Civil conspiracy in Pennsylvania requires proof of an agreement between two or more parties to commit an unlawful act or to use unlawful means to achieve a lawful goal. Application. If evidence suggests that TD Jakes and Jermaine Jakes coordinated the threat to silence defendant, a claim for civil conspiracy may be sustained. No. Um, because they have to have a goal or be making money or something like that. So, mm-mm, no. I'll say no. I'll say no to that one too. Defendant seeks leave to pursue compensatory damages for the emotional and psychological harm caused by the threat. No. So this is interesting. This is interesting. So the question I asked a few minutes ago is I wonder what claims, and I hadn't read through all this prior to going live, what claims were Youngblood going to pursue based on TD Jake's actions? It sounds like none. All of his counterclaims, at least according to what his attorney is saying right here, stem from the son sending a text message. Oh, and then that's the other thing about conspiracy. I'm almost certain there's no way that his attorney can prove that TD Jake's son and TD Jakes talked about that message before the son sent it. Mm-mm. If I could be held guilty for every action my kids took, I would probably not be sitting here right now. No, I'm joking, y'all. That's not true. But no, he would not. He's probably not gonna be able to prove that. But that's interesting. That is interesting. So it looks like he's not bringing any standalone claims related to the alleged sexual abuse. That's interesting. Okay, we're gonna stop sharing that. We're gonna go to 43. I'm sorry, I need to share that first. So you may wonder why even make those allegations if he doesn't have a legal claim to bring forward related to those. I don't know. Maybe he wants those to be a surprise. Maybe his attorney is just saying, this is what we're going. Maybe he's going to add something else. Is it? I don't know. Because why even make the allegations? I'm going to think about that one. Okay, so now we're going to go to the regular motion to dismiss that he filed. So like I said, the judge did not grant that special motion to dismiss. So then Youngblood files a motion to dismiss under Rule 12b-6. And Rule 12b-6 basically says this plaintiff fails to assert a claim. So this case should be dismissed. So that's how he's proceeding now. Okay, so we're just going to do an overview because we've already talked about a lot of the arguments. So table of contents, again, I think that I like this. I wish the table of contents was spaced out like the other one and on a separate page. In the last one, the table of authorities was on a separate page and the table of contents was on another page. I like that better, but here we are, still organized. But then you can kind of see, so the space moment, the attorney is moving quickly and trying to I know from experience, you just be trying to keep up with everything. Let's go over the argument. The complaint fails to say the Bible, which is bogus definition. I agree with that. Plaintiff fails to plead falsity with factual particularity. I agree with that too. TD Jakes did not present any facts about what actually happened between him and Youngblood. He didn't say, I didn't meet Youngblood. I don't know who this man is. Or, I met him. We had dinner and then he left and I left. I mean, it was no facts. That was very telling to me. That was very telling. Plaintiff fails to plead actual malice. Plaintiff fails to allege publication and reputational harm with specificity. I disagree. I don't. Mm, TD Jakes wasn't very specific, but he did plead it. I'm gonna stop sharing for a minute. Okay. The picture mode closed to maintain recording. Okay, I wanted to make sure I didn't lose y'all. Let me share it again. I can see my internet is starting to act up again, so we're gonna be quick on this one. Oh, my husband's calling. Okay, so plaintiff fails to allege publication and reputational harm with specificity. Ooh, it wasn't very specific, but I think that TD Jake's attorney did a great job of talking about the harm. This is a public figure. He's he preaches around the world. He has 30,000 members. It's very easy to see the reputational harm. Okay, the complaint fails to state a claim for civil conspiracy. How I feel about that? It's the complaint doesn't have a great claim for civil conspiracy, in part because the people who he's saying Youngblood conspired with, he has them listed as John Does. So who are these people, and what did they actually do? So the civil conspiracy claim can definitely take some work. But I think if he goes back and he adds um, Larry Reed as a defendant, and he says, hey, it was a conspiracy between Youngblood and Reed to get viewers and to get money, then I think, yes, the civil conspiracy claim is a lot stronger. Plaintiff fails to plead a viable underlying tort. Plaintiff fails to allege a plausible meeting of the minds or agreement. Plaintiff fails to allege malice. I don't agree with that one. Plaintiff relies on impermissible group pleading. I don't know about that. Okay, table of authorities. Preliminary statement, very similar to things he's already said. Okay. The court, this is interesting. The court has already noted, and this was filed May 5th. So this is fresh tea. This is fresh tea. Today's May 7th. This was filed on May 5th. Okay, so let's see. The court has already noted in its April 25th, 2025 memorandum opinion that plaintiff's complaint is repetitive and heavy on rhetoric, with no factual details supporting the core elements of its claims. And that's exactly what we talked about in the last live. There's just no detail. There's no detail about the relationship between Youngblood and TD Jakes, or the meeting, when it happened, how it happened, none of that. So the court noted that. That's very interesting. I'm going to see if I can pull this order up before we get off today. I want to see what else the judge is saying, because of course, as opposing counsel, the attorney, Youngblood's attorney, is going to pick out the part that's best for him and leave out everything else. So I'll see if I can pull that up before we get off today. This is talking about the Twombly-Iqbal standard. Basically, it's the standard by which complaints are judged. When you put allegations in a complaint, they don't have to be perfect. You don't have to plead perfectly, but it has to be plausible. And so Twombly and Iqbal, those are the most famous cases that describe how to plead with specificity in a way that your complaint will not be dismissed on its face. Okay, this gets into the analysis. Argument. The complaint fails to state a claim for defamation. Now this, I actually think I'm gonna look at that memorandum, but I tend to agree with Youngblood's attorney because of the lack of any allegations regarding the relationship between Youngblood and TD Jakes. I'm inclined to believe that on its face, it fails. The complaint fails to identify a specific defamatory statement. I agree. I agree with that. The complaint's reliance entirely on ambiguous summaries. Yes, the complaint went on and on about how great TD Jakes is, and he has 30,000 members, and he was at the president's church preaching, and all these different things had nothing to do with defamation. So I agree. I agree with those things. The complaint fails to allege actual malice. To survive dismissal, a public figure must allege facts suggesting that the speaker had serious doubts about the truth of their statements. Hmm. I gotta think about that. Hmm. I think the fact that Youngblood, he also talked about another bishop that allegedly assaulted him, and weaving that conversation around abuse in the church was so genius. I don't know if he intentionally did that. I don't think he was talking about it in a way where he was like, let me avoid defamation. But it was very genius how he talked about the allegations in the context of a larger conversation about sexual abuse in a church. That was very genius. And how he couched that, I think the way he couched that, we can really make the argument that he didn't mean any malice specifically to TD Jakes because that was not the larger conversation. That being said, if you mention his name in sexual abuse, you know what's going to happen. But I think that, I don't know if that was Larry Reed's idea or his team. I'm sure he has an attorney on his team, but that was good the way they couched that conversation. The conversation was about sexual abuse in the church, right? But it was really about TD Jakes. That's why everybody else was listening. Um, okay, so we're not gonna read through all these. The complaint fails to state a claim for a civil conspiracy. Like I said, I agree. You got John Doe's. You're not saying what they did or who they are. Mm-mm. So um, what I think TD Jake's attorney is going to do is file an amended complaint. So as a plaintiff, you can file an amended complaint as a matter of course, meaning you don't have to ask. You can file it as a matter of course before the defendant files an answer. So, like we said in the beginning, technically, a motion to dismiss is not an answer. So, plaintiff can still file an amended complaint. So, I think that's what he will do. There are situations as an attorney where you're just such in a rush to actually file the complaint that you will file it without all the facts. You will file it without all the research and really digging in because you're just trying to get it out. And then you go back and you file an amended complaint. So that's what I think is going to happen. I think he's going to file an amended complaint. I think after reading this, Bishop Jake's attorney is going to be like, yeah, I got some holes to plug in. And I think he's going to file an amended complaint. I think that's what's going to happen. Um, okay, so let me stop sharing this. Let me see if I can pull up that order because I did not know that the judge actually, I didn't know that the judge actually had a memorandum. Okay. Motion. Hmm. Scheduling order. Let me see what this memorandum, if he's noted. Because a lot of times when we refer to a document in a docket, we have to put the docket number. Let's see. April 25th, 2025. That might have been the order to deny that motion to brief and support. Oh, April 25th. That might be the motion, the order when the judge denied the special motion to dismiss. That's probably what that order is. Yeah. Okay. Memorandum opinion. I don't want to hold y'all, but let me see how long it is. Oh, it's 18 pages. It's 18 pages, y'all. We're not going to be able to get through all this today. So, I don't know. Maybe we'll do a part 3 and we'll get into this memorandum opinion. Um, hmm. I think we might have to do a part 3. I thought this was just going to be a 2-part series, but I think this memorandum opinion is going to give us some insight into what the judge is thinking. So I'm very curious. So, okay, I'm going to read through this. If I find it to be intriguing, we'll get back on for a part 3 and, go from there. But if not, then we'll pivot and talk about something else. I did want to get into the Diddy trial and possibly the ruling that the Supreme Court issued yesterday regarding trans service men and women. I haven't read the opinion yet. What I will say is, what I find very interesting is that we have the three liberal justices, they dissented, but they did not provide a reasoning for their dissent. I find that to be so interesting, because when we know that this opinion is going to be fought, it's going to be litigated for years to come, kind of like Roe versus Wade, right? Roe versus Wade was decided in what, 1970? It might have been 1973. Then it was overturned in what was that, 2021? So we're talking about 40 years of challenges. And so I can see this issue being litigated for some time, back and forth. So a lot of times when a party is challenging a court's decision, or they want to challenge a court's decision, they will go to the minority opinion and see what the minority wrote in its opposition and use that as a springboard for their argument. But in this case, the 3 judges, they dissented but did not provide any reasoning for that dissent, meaning the people who want to oppose this opinion or continue to litigate it in the lower courts, they don't have a springboard. So I find that to be super interesting, especially because these are liberal judges. So what I think we have is, I think we have a court who clearly the conservatives and the liberals are not on the same page, in terms of how they think things should be decided, but they want to look cohesive. So, okay, I'm gonna consent. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm gonna dissent, but I'm not gonna provide the reasons because I still want us to move forward. So I actually think it's a brilliant move by the court to show some solidarity, even in opposition. And I think as a nation, that's what we really need right now. We have Democrats, we have Republicans that are very divided. We have white Americans, we have black Americans that are very divided, but we're all in this country together. So we have to find a way. We don't have to, right? But it would behoove us to find a way to move forward in solidarity. So I think that's what the court is trying to do. I think they're trying to show we're apart, but we're together. And I think it's brilliant. And I think it's something that we'll look back on when we're looking back on these turbulent years. I think we're going to look back and we're going to applaud the court for how they're moving. They're being very strategic. One thing and I like to study history. I used to be a history buff. Now I have so many kids. So I don't have time to really delve into things the way I used to, but I used to love to read about the different Supreme Courts and to read about the different presidential administrations, because there's always so much going on behind the scenes and they're always playing chess and not checkers. I mean, even with, and I'm gonna let y'all go because it's been over an hour, but even with President Trump, and um, we see how he is, his administration is doing its best to deport illegal immigrants, right, wrong, or otherwise. He doing it right, wrong, and otherwise. He doing all three to get people out. But um, Garcia, Obrega Garcia, I'm not gonna say his name right. The Maryland man, they kept saying was a Maryland man. Democrats kept saying this Maryland man, he got kidnapped and sent to El Salvador. Did you notice how President Trump's administration, they dripped details like every week? It was like the tattoos, and then it was the affidavits from the wife, and then it was the court proceedings, and then a couple days ago they dropped the audio from the wife talking about how bad he abused her. You have to know that they had all that information up front. But what they did was wait for the Democrats to get all in, and then they released those things one by one. These administrations and these courts, they are always, and when I say courts, I mean the Supreme Court, they are always playing chess and not checkers. And they're thinking like 20 years ahead. Even some of the things that Donald Trump is doing, he knows it's going to be challenged. But what he wants to happen, he wants the court, the Supreme Court, to step in and make a decision. Even this argument about due process, I don't even know the answer. The Constitution does not say due process is only for U.S. citizens. But we also didn't have this immigration issue right when the Constitution was written. So it's like, what is the answer? Donald Trump is going to keep forcing the issue until the court actually makes a ruling and sets what the law is. And I will say, as an attorney, I appreciate that because I want to know what the law is. Like, I don't want to feel like, oh, I don't know. I'm confused too. I really want to know what the law is. And I think up until now, the law was anything we said it was, you know? But once the court takes up that issue, we're going to have a very clear precedent about due process, whether it applies to citizens and non-citizens, and if it does apply to both, to what extent do non-citizens get due process to the same extent as citizens? They need to give us a clear answer. And then lastly, I'll say, even with the court saying, the issue with the Maryland man made it all the way up to the Supreme Court. They said Donald Trump has to, I think they said effectuate, has to effectuate his return. You have to know. I used to work for a judge, and the clerks, we write the decisions. I was a clerk. We write the decision. The judge, of course, reads it and signs off on it. It has to be the judge's thoughts, right? We're not just writing it based on what we think. It has to be the judge's opinion and the judge's thoughts. But you have to know that every single word, when I mean every single word, every single comma is thought out. No, they said facilitate. So for them to say facilitate, and not say he has to bring them back. If he doesn't bring them back, he's in contempt. Da, da, da. For them to say facilitate, they know what they're doing. They know exactly what they're doing. So I'm gonna leave it at that because I'll keep talking. But these administrations and these Supreme Courts, they are very intriguing. And the interesting thing about the Supreme Court, they survive different administrations, right? Because they serve life appointments, and so they're a constant. Presidential administrations are constantly changing, right? Every 4 years, maybe 8 years, but the Supreme Court is a constant. So don't sleep on the Supreme Court, okay? They playing chess. But anyway, that's it for today. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for catching the replay. Leave some comments. What do you guys want to hear about next? Let me know. Talk to you soon.